My name is Dr. Ettensohn. Welcome to Heal NPD. NPD is a disorder that involves reactive, unstable images of the self and of other people. When the person feels they're doing well, they may have a grandiose self-image. And when they feel they're not doing so well, they may have a collapsed or devalued self-image. Another term for this is contingent self-esteem. The reactive images also extend to other people, who are idealized or devalued depending on the situation. Calling these images of the self and others is a bit misleading. It makes it sound as though the individual is simply imagining things that make them feel superior or upset. But the instability often extends deeper than ideas or images. It involves something called self-states. These are distinct sectors of identity, each with their own curated collection of associations, experiences, relational matrices, and perspectives. Imagine walking through a museum, where each new room offers a different exhibit, organized around a different theme. The Ancient Egypt collection is significantly different than the one that focuses on ancient Rome. To be fair, we all have different self-states. It's not by itself a sign of pathology. As I've said in previous videos, the you that shows up for work every day might be quite different than the versions of you that show up to the night out with friends, the dinner with your extended family, or are in costume to the cosplay convention. Each of these self-states holds different emotional centers of gravity. One is more formal and constricted. Another throws caution to the wind and is ready to let loose. And another still feels like a 12-year-old again as familiar family dysfunction unfolds at the holiday gathering. A mark of psychological health and integration is the ability to move fluidly between these self-states as the situation requires. They should be relatively associated with each other. The work self-state shouldn't be so different than the hanging out with friends self-state that it's as though you're an entirely different person. The extent to which a person can move between these mini identities while maintaining a relatively cohesive internal experience is a function of reflective capacities and dissociation. Reflective capacity is the ability to link self-states together, providing a sense of psychological continuity. Psychoanalyst Philip Bromberg captures this beautifully in his seminal work, Standing in the Spaces. He writes, "Health is the ability to stand in the spaces between realities without losing any of them, the capacity to feel like oneself while being many." We develop that ability through nurturing and collaborative relationships in childhood and adolescence, where we receive helpful feedback about how we seem to be feeling, what we seem to want, and how we're behaving across situations and environments. But in the face of trauma and chronic dysfunction, knowing about different self-states can be disturbing or even dangerous. If a parent flies into dysregulated rages when confronted about their drinking, let's say, then it's adaptive for the child to keep feelings about the parent's drinking locked away in a dissociated self-state, presenting instead a different self-state, one that's more accommodating or even self-blaming. Dissociative defenses drive self-states apart, preventing the development of reflective capacities that could link them together to create a more seamless internal and external experience. In the case of pathological narcissism and NPD, there may be numerous dissociated self-states that we could broadly group under the headings of grandiose and vulnerable. Vulnerable self-states may hold unbearable feelings of grief, rage, shame, humiliation, and intolerable unmet emotional longings, feelings that are directed at attachment figures who are also sources of fear, inconsistency, or neglect. Grandiose self-states are distillations of positive feelings about the self and others, times when things felt good, even transcendent. The resulting dichotomies can feel irresolvable, too contradictory. Bringing the collapsed experiences into proximity with the grandiose experiences can feel dangerous. Dissociation becomes a self-protective strategy, a way to keep incompatible emotional truths from colliding. Separate self-states can hold quarantined experiences. Rage in one, idealization in another, shame in yet another, without contaminating the whole. The cost is fragmentation, but the benefit is survival. I'm really talking about splitting. In a previous video, I explained that splitting is fundamentally dissociative. It involves contradictory self-states that are kept apart from each other and are prevented from communicating. The extent of the dissociation varies depending on the person. For some, the splits cause wildly inconsistent behaviors that are extremely disruptive to their life and their relationships. For others, it's more subtle, but still disruptive, where self-states aren't totally dissociated, but there's still a feeling of being cut off from oneself, of swinging between experiential poles without access to a middle ground. The person may want connection, but be unable to tolerate it. They may believe themselves superior in one moment, but worthless in the next. As different self-states move in and out of dominance, they cause the person to become completely identified with whatever they're experiencing in that moment. There may effectively be no me watching the process, only the perspective of the self-state that's active. In healthy development, these self-states are bridged by what we might call a reflective or observing ego function, the, quote, self, so to speak. The person can hold multiple internal perspectives without needing to resolve them immediately or collapse them into a single unipolar position. They can tolerate ambivalence, think about their experience rather than just identifying with it or enacting it. In treatment, we often see this capacity develop gradually. Early on, individuals may rage at the therapist one week and then behave as though nothing happened the next. They're often genuinely unaware of the discontinuity because the previous week they were occupying one self-state and the following week they're occupying a different self-state. Later in the treatment, they may develop a stronger ability to reflect on their behavior after the fact, when safely distanced from the triggered self-state. They may say something like, "I shouldn't have said that last week," or "Now I can see why I was mad at you." This signals that an observing self is developing, but one that's still easily overwhelmed by the emotional power of the split-off self-states. Next, they may begin to reflect on their conflict in the moment, even if they can't change how they're behaving. And eventually, they begin to reflect from within multiple self-states at the same time, accompanied by the ability to inhibit the impulses of the triggered self-state, saying something like, "I feel like I hate you right now, but I also know that you're trying to help." There's also a particularly challenging place in between the after-the-fact reflection and the within self-state reflection. It's when someone begins to feel the pull of multiple self-states at once, without collapsing fully into any of them. This experience involves feelings of instability, ambiguity, and discomfort. It marks an intersection between old defenses that don't fully protect anymore and new integrations that haven't yet formed. This is the space where much of the real work and treatment takes place. From the outside, this can be hard to recognize as progress. It may even resemble something like getting worse. But from a clinical standpoint, it's often a sign that something important is happening. The person is beginning to experience themselves as a subject, someone continuous and capable of holding contradictions, rather than simply a series of reactive self-states. For individuals with pathological narcissism, this is an especially difficult juncture. And that's because narcissistic defenses are constructed around independence, certainty, and control. The idea of being ambivalent, confused, or in pieces calls this entire defensive scaffolding into question. To stand in an in-between space without resolving it, without knowing who's right, what's true, or how one is supposed to feel, risks invoking intolerable dependency longings, the need for holding, containment, support, and reassurance. These are triggering experiences, often intimately involved in the early narcissistic injuries that necessitated the maladaptive defenses in the first place. But that's also where something new becomes possible. If we can help someone stay in that space just a little longer, not to force insight or demand resolution, but simply to hold the tension, then the internal system can begin to reorganize. The self doesn't need to be either this or that. It can become more inclusive and tolerant of internal ambiguity and contradiction. Basically, internal experience can become more integrated. Now, while I often discuss the concept of integration on this channel, I want to clarify that integration is more of an aspirational goal. It's like a compass point rather than a destination. Even the healthiest among us consists of multiple self-states, and some may be more or less integrated than others. The goal isn't to eliminate dissociation entirely. Rather, it's to develop a relationship with one's dissociative tendencies, to get better at recognizing the community of selves of which we all consist. Through this lens, therapy becomes about increasing the person's capacity to stand in the spaces between these selves, to become less reactive and more reflective. In so doing, to build a self that's not defined by its parts, but by the capacity to hold them together. Being able to know about the hurt parts, the enraged parts, the superior parts, and the empty parts, even if they can't all be tied together with a bow, is often enough to significantly ease the distress and discontinuity that characterizes personality disorder. Recognizing that you aren't a single, unitary self, but instead a community of self-states, is an important first step. Paradoxically, it's in that recognition that something new begins to emerge, an observing capacity that is able to know about all of the self-states while not really being identified with any of them. That sort of developmental accomplishment is subtle but profound. It's not announced by fireworks, but for those who know what it feels like to be taken over by a state of mind that they can't escape, being able to say, "I'm still here, even in this," can be life-changing. Okay, so that's it for today. Just a reminder that I have a new membership tier on the channel called Heal NPD Companion. It includes access to all of the benefits of the lower tier, plus access to an exclusive monthly live stream and the chatbot that I've developed and trained on my content. If you'd like to learn more, check out the video I made last week. I'll link to it in the description. Until next time, take good care.